And we're back on the Fowler Show. It's time for one of my final segments, with my favorite segment. Can we all just get along? Get this, America. The Department of Education confirmed it is no longer investigating civil rights complaints from transgender students barred from school bathrooms that match their gender identity. This leaves those students vulnerable to bullying and violence. This update comes after the Trump administration rolled back an Obama-era policy to allow students to use the bathroom that align with their gender identity. Let's dive right in, and let's start with the news of the day. All across this country, America, everywhere, all across our great United States, we've seen this week activism from 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds demanding change. They've walked out of their school campuses. My own high school, Fort Lauderdale High School, had their walkout on Tuesday. Let's go Flying Owls. My middle school had a walkout today. My brother's high school had a walkout today. There's national walkouts scheduled all across the country. And if you look at these walkouts, and you look there, you just don't see white kids. You just don't see black kids. You don't see transgendered kids. You don't see gay kids. You see all these kids coming together, united, hand in hand, saying, we want change, we demand action. And in lieu of all that change, and they're talking about gun violence, but the string I want to connect to you is this. Here's a string here, is that these students get it. These kids get it. The Bible says the children shall lead us, and they are absolutely right. These kids get it. We've all got to come together and put aside our differences, and we've got to stand up for each other. We've got to have solidarity with one another. And Betsy DeVos and her Department of Education is an affront to that solidarity by singling out transgendered students. Don't get me wrong. You don't have to believe or like transgenderism to believe that these kids have rights, because they do. And this is something that the majority of Americans agree on. And let's remember, folks, that LGBTQ students have it really hard. 65% of LGBTQ students heard remarks like the F word and the D word are frequently used against them. 30% missed at least one day of school in the past month because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. 85% were verbally harassed in the past year. We are literally creating an environment where it is not safe for our young people to go to school, not only with guns, but also with discrimination. So when you have students all across the country saying, we want safer schools, we want schools that are safe, welcoming, and thriving, you have a Department of Education doing the absolute opposite. You have a Secretary of Education who says trans kids don't matter to me. Their gender identity is irrelevant to me. I could give a damn if they're being bullied. I could give a damn if they're missing days in school. Now bring this full circle. Republicans are sitting here and they're trying to make the argument that the real problem we have is mental health in our school systems. And if you gave them that argument just for a minute, and the guns aren't the problem. But let's give the Republican their argument, because I think to some extent they're right, that we do have a mental health care problem in our schools. So you have kids who are depressed, you have kids who come from broken homes, you have kids who deal with violence every day, and you also have kids who are bullied. And it is a job of adults, it's a job of our Department of Education to look out for these kids, so they don't pick up a gun, so they can go to school, so their schools can be safe and welcoming and thriving. And what you have from Betsy DeVos is the opposite. She's saying that these particular group of children, their lives don't matter. Not on an iota to me. So much so that I have instructed my Department of Education to no longer investigate their claims of discrimination, when it is a job of the Department of Education to look out for every student, no matter their color, their creed, their sexual orientation, or their citizenship status. America, this is wrong. Point blank, period. Now, the Obama administration directed public schools to allow students to use the bathroom that aligned with their gender identity, even if it conflicted with the gender on their birth certificate. The administration concluded that barring transgender students from public school bathrooms was a form of sexual discrimination and prohibited under Title under Title IX, rather. But then came our two good buddies, Betsy DeVos and Jeff Sessions, who want to take our country backwards. You don't have to take my word for it, just look at their record. And what they did is they rescinded the guidance. DeVos said that the states and individual school districts should be able to determine how to accommodate trans students. They argue that Title IX does not obligate schools to allow transgendered kids to use the bathroom of their choice. And in my mind, I'm trying to say, how is that possible? Because the Title IX has everything to do with gender discrimination. And if you're saying, if I'm a trans woman and you're saying I can't use the woman's bathroom and I have to use the men's bathroom, not only are you forcing me to be humiliated and you're forcing me to be bullied, you're literally putting me into a pressure cooker. Number one. But number two, you're discriminating against my gender identity, which is, for the purpose of this conversation, my sex. It's a pretty simple concept, right? Now, transgender students held out hope that the department would continue to back them when they raised issues about bathroom access, even though the guidance was no longer in place. Advocates maintain, tons of groups have maintained that Title IX, which bars sexual discrimination in schools that receive federal funds, requires schools to allow transgender students to use the bathrooms that match their gender identity. And some federal appeals courts have backed this particular view. But it doesn't matter to good old Betsy, because Betsy could care less about the laws and cares all about her particular Christian ideology. Well, Betsy, let me give you a lesson about Christ, because I think you missed it in your Sunday school class. Jesus loved everybody. I think he says the greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself and treat others as you would like to be treated. And just think about who he hung out with. And I always think of the story of the woman with the alabaster box who used her hair to wash his feet with the most expensive perfume possible. And he accepted her, and he erased her of all her blemishes and erased her of all her sins. Jesus was a lover. He believed in love. He believed in accepting difference. And if you think about it, almost to the day, at his crucifixion, he was discriminated against, and he got it. That you've got to love your neighbor as yourself. You've got to treat others as you'd like to be treated. Those are the two golden commandments. And yet still, people go around and they conjure up Bible scriptures and they use them all willy-nilly, and they have basically twisted and turned and melted and molded Christian theology to match their hate and their bigotry for difference. I always like to remind people of this. Betsy DeVos might not be a racist today, but about 3 decades ago, I guarantee you, if there was a lynching, Betsy would have been on the side of the lynchers and not the person being lynched. And those are just the facts. So when you sit here and you discriminate against one person, you discriminate against all people. As my hero, Bayard Rustin, says, we aren't free until every one of us is free.